This meeting to order, the Policy Advisory Committee meeting for September. I'll begin with roll. David Janis, present. Renee Westelusk.
Here.
West Katzenstein.
Here.
Lyle Fisher.
Here.
Judy Decker. Here. Camille Anderson. She's out of country. Tim Carroll. Not here. Regina Troglin. Not here or online. Non-voting members, our newest member, George Kroll.
Present.
Tom McCoskis.
Here.
John Kersey.
Here.
Lorelei Oviatt. Not here or not online. Yes. With that, we have a quorum, barely, but we have our 5 out of our 8 voting members, so we have a legal meeting. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you all face the flag, put your hand over your heart and follow after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Seats. Okay, with that, and I want to welcome George Kroll as a member, first meeting as a member of the Policy Advisory Committee. He is the replacement for Don Zadiba as the voting representative for the Indian Wells Valley Water District. So everybody, welcome, and please feel free to introduce yourself if you haven't already after the meeting. At this time, we'll go to our next agenda item, which is open public comment. Do we have any from the room? Seeing none, do we have any online? No, seeing none, we'll move to our next agenda item, which is approve the minutes of our July Policy Advisory Committee. I'll entertain a motion or discussion.
Well, I couldn't pull them up to review them again, so I will abstain.
What, did we get them? I don't remember.
Yeah, I sent them before the July meeting, or before the August meeting that was canceled.
I'm sure I read it.
So do we have enough folks that read them? Well, they were essentially the same as the PAC report from the GA meeting.
I did not go back and find them. I fully expect I would approve them, but perhaps could we defer it for?
Okay, given that I would say, given that we have a slim a majority or quorum anyway, let's defer that for the next meeting and just to do our due diligence with regards to properly approving them or not, or modifying them. So with that, that brings us to item number 5, PAC recommendations for board consideration as requested by the board regarding the shallow well mitigation program, specifically review the ad hoc subcommittee recommendations regarding fair and reasonable expectations for documentation on the demonstration of well maintenance under the shallow well mitigation program and develop full PAC recommendations. At the last meeting, we voted to accept the 2-page document that the subcommittee had submitted. So and there was a motion made and approved to add a summary statement regarding the specific recommendation for the minimum documentation de minimis well owners should be expected to provide to the GA under the program as discussed. So what the subcommittee went off and did a lot more work on this and came back and gave us 2 documents. They made some minor revisions to the initial document that we'd already approved, and for due diligence, we should review those or discuss those, review those, and confirm that we would accept those to be the full policy Policy Advisory Committee report before we go to the second one. So with that, Judy or other members, do you want to discuss the
Yes.
changes made?
Yes, first of all, since George is new, and I didn't know whether Regina was going to be here, I wrote up a little sort of summary statement of what's been going on, and some of it is a repeat of what you said, but I'm going to read it anyway. First of all, the subcommittee consists of myself. I got the Booby Prize. I got to be the chairwoman, and Wes Katzenstein and Lyle Fisher, and Don Decker has assisted us as a technical advisory, and he is a member of the Technical Advisory Committee. We are all de minimis well owners. Don and I are also water district customers. We have been involved in water issues in this valley way before Sigma started. Some of us go back to the early 70s. And as a background, the GSP contains a shallow well mitigation program. The replenishment fee was established to fund this mitigation program. During the review of the first two applicants, the need for a well-defined policy on this issue became very clear. A subcommittee of PAC was appointed to create a shallow well mitigation policy, among other things. The committee determined to base the policy on the de minimis well owner, which over 90% of all the wells in the Indian Wells Valley are de minimis wells. And that was the reason they used. The shallow well, I didn't know I needed my fly swatter here. The shallow well mitigation policy was brought to the PAC at the June meeting. Revisions and suggestions were made. These revisions and suggestions were edited into the policy, and it was returned to the PAC at the July meeting. The PAC approved the documentation that the subcommittee brought forth at the July meeting with minor suggestions and revisions. These suggestions and revisions were added, and the document reviewed had a final review by the subcommittee. This final document was sent to the PAC prior to the scheduled August meeting, and this is what we will be discussing tonight. I put approved because I was unclear whether we had actually approved it, but you said we did, so we did. The policy consists of two parts. The one you're familiar with, a summary of de minimis shallow well failure due to declining water levels and/or declining water quality, and a document describing how to submit a request for mitigation into a policy to set for guidelines for the de minimis well owner. If PAC approves this tonight, the board can use this policy to the advantage of the staff, the applicant, and the board because of the clear definitions, because of the definitions and clarity that are in it. And I did not redline a copy, so if you have all had ample time, except for George, to read through both of these documents. We have added things that you have asked for, and in the summary part of it, I note on I think it's part 5, we put in the things that John Kersey in particular wanted to have addressed regarding water quality. And I don't have any more to say, really. I don't know, what you guys think of it. I'd like to know. I think while it's somewhat repetitious, the document on how to submit a mitigation request, we talked about that, and you said you wanted a one-page document, and so here it is for you. And I think it addresses the issues that were brought up about water quality and general mineral testing and some of the other issues that can be addressed with regard to water quality in certain areas.
Yeah, so since that was for me, can I ask questions now? About sort of I don't have the policy in front of me, so I was going to say, I assume relevant factors would include sort of the age of the well, how long it's been in service, how deep it is, all the sort of physical characteristics, correct? And the policy, it appears you inferred that the policy could also be used for a decline in water quality. Is that, I'm trying to understand, so how do we define a decline in water quality versus
The
just?
water quality definition is based on the standards set by the state.
Right, but declining water quality means that you have sort of do they have to have like some sort of historical record of like last year it was this good, this year it was?
That's discussed in here.
Okay.
It's summarized.
And I asked because I got a request at the water district this last week from a well owner who was suffering from some vastly degraded water quality issues they talked about, but their well wasn't dry. However, they were wanting to be connected to the district, but the costs were so high that it was impractical for them. And
Just for clarity, George, if you remember at the GA meeting, they talked about an application that had come in from Mr. Byerly. And I believe the price he's paying to have a new well drilled, and this is, the well is not in a boulder patch, it's out there off a strecker, is $61,000.
yeah, and so this was not Mr. Byerly. This was someone who has not contacted the GA, is not aware of the shallow well mitigation program at all. So I'm in contact with this person,
Okay.
discussing fees to connect to the water district, which are excessive. And so when you said that the shallow well mitigation program could potentially cover both degradation in probably pump flow rates or going dry, as well as water quality issues, I don't know if it would be the general recommendation of this board that I might be prudent to point that person in the direction of submitting an application that could be reviewed, not a guarantee that anything's going to happen, but at least make them aware of the program and that water quality can be concerned?
That
Certainly.
recommendation wouldn't be something you would be prohibited or be approved by this board. Any of us may make that recommendation to somebody that brings it forward.
But I believe water quality is brought up as an issue in the groundwater sustainability plan.
The shallow well mitigation plan, and that's the title of it. And the committee has had dozens of hours of putting work in on this. The subcommittee has. This committee has already had at least 4 hours of discussion and review and modification of this, and you don't have the benefit of all that. But the shallow well mitigation plan or policy is under SGMA. The Groundwater Authority is required to correct any deficient or anything. Wes, Wes says it very well, so I would ask Wes to make his statement that you've made a couple times.
See if I can make it cleanly again.
Yeah, we've made that statement also in the PAC report.
Yeah, the groundwater sustainability plan has the obligation to preclude undesirable results. resulting from groundwater lowering or groundwater quality problems. And basically, any shallow de minimis well that fails under the Groundwater Authority's tenure should qualify or could qualify as an undesirable result. And the Groundwater Authority has put in place this shallow well mitigation program with the idea that shallow wells should be mitigated if they fail. So it sounds to me like the well you've described as a candidate and should apply for mitigation.
And it's been discussed at the Groundwater Authority level, the board level, that the policy is applicable to any well in the valley that goes dry from the chronic lowering of the water table, and that's Sigma's interpretation. So although this group has said our expertise, and this comes from the subcommittee, our expertise is in the de minimis small wells. It's not limited to, that policy is not limited to them. So it includes larger, and it could include any well in the valley that goes dry because of the adverse chronic lowering of the water table. But our recommendations and our frame of reference and what we felt comfortable with going back to the Groundwater Authority Board was limited to the smaller wells, and that's been summarized previously in our discussions in the two policy advisory committee reports that preceded this. So
Right.
we limited it to the de minimis wells and small wells.
As you must know, a community well or an agricultural well, they have different requirements. They have different pump motor well setups, and we are not at all familiar with those to the point where we felt we could create a policy regarding them. And anybody that is on a large co-op or a mutual or whatever it's called has to legally go through certain state standards and has to report to the state. So that's a whole different ballgame, if you will.
Yeah, I think I have a pretty clear understanding of the de minimis type well versus sort of more of a commercial or a co-op type well. So that's pretty clear. For the committee's benefit, I did make some comments in a meeting we had the other day at the district. We, in particular, with reference to the person who said their well went dry and it was an emergency. After doing some research, I did some data analysis. We turn 50 customers' water off every month, and they have no water, and that does not constitute an emergency for people's reference. So as the person who's responsible for sending crews out to turn people who are some of the oftentimes more disadvantaged in our community, and nobody likes turning people's water off. It's state law. We follow the regulations as we have to. So, I did make some comments that we should keep that in mind as well, that those people are also watching and those people are also out there, and they also have hardships that they have to deal with. Maybe that's, as was noted, that may not be an apples to apples comparison, but certainly it's something I'm cognizant of because of situations. A couple of my guys had a guy threaten to injure them in the process of them shutting this person's water off, and it's a tough business. So, just that comment.
Thank you. Okay, having heard the committee or the subcommittee chair summarize the changes that were made to the approved document, I read them, and almost they're minor things. There's words of clarification added here. There's added here and there, and there's some restructuring that perhaps make it clear. The only thing that was added, and Judy pointed it out, is the paragraph in the middle of the second page about the well is declared a human health failure condition. That entire paragraph is the only thing new that we hadn't seen before.
Right.
So if everybody agrees that with the addition of these clarifications and that paragraph, that we stand behind this document as a policy advisory, or as a full policy advisory committee to go forward, I'll entertain a motion.
Does
for
that
such.
include
So
the
moved.
second one too?
No, we'll get to the second document. We're just doing, we're
One at a time.
we're making sure that we are legal with what we're going to submit. As we had previously approved the previous document, we've got to approve any change to it. So we'll do that, and then we'll move to the second document.
I'll make a motion.
I have a question. To me, it's like a two-part document. One's definitions and one is the checklist for
The
maintenance.
checklist is a second document.
Okay.
We're not talking about that yet. That's the new document they provided.
Okay,
The two-pager, this is the updated two-pager that they submitted last time with the minor changes and the one paragraph added. And Judy's discussed it, and she mentioned why and what issue that was covering. So we have a motion from Judy as
Okay,
a
I would
policy
second
advisory
that.
committee to accept it.
I would second that.
Okay. Do we have any more discussion?
I just would like to say I'm glad you made it more concise because I pulled out my original documents that were done by the subcommittee, and one document was 3 pages long, and I think the other one was longer than that. So I appreciate
You're
your
welcome.
updating it, making it more concise into 2 pages.
Any other discussion? With that, what we're voting on is accepting the clarifications and the additional paragraph in this document will represent now the full PAC recommendation, and then we'll discuss the second issue. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions or recusals? Okay, so it passed 5-0 unanimously. All right, with that, we'll go to the second document, and I'll let Judy begin. This was the document that Tim Carroll made the motion that was voted on and passed last time, that the documentation de minimis well owners should expect to provide to the GA. It's the recommendation for the minimum documentation that de minimis well owners should be expected to provide to the GA under the program as discussed.
Well, again, we had written documentation on this. We presented to you earlier. We talked about this. We talked about it at length at the last meeting. And we principally, in listening to back up, in listening to Steve Johnson, both at the last meeting discussing the 2 wells that have issues, and in remembering the well issues of the 2 prior applicants that came before the board, it's obvious that they need what do you want to call it, a checklist, if you will, and that's what this is. And this is something all you had to do is listen to Steve trying to describe what Mr. Byerly, not to bring him up all the time, except they did bring up his name, what he wrote down. If he had had this list, it would have been ever so much simpler and clearer, not only to staff, to Stetson Engineers who's reviewing this, to the well owner himself as well as the well driller. And you have a board that, as nearly as I can discern, there's only one of them who is familiar with wells, and that's Chuck Griffin. And so you have a board ruling on something, and in the future, if you have future boards ruling on something that they really don't know much about. And this spells it out. It's like a recipe, you don't put the butter in the flour afterwards, you beat it up first. And that's what this is. This is a checklist for the well owner, it's a checklist for staff, it's a checklist for the driller. The driller will provide much of this information because he has to have it.
Discussion?
Yeah, a couple of comments here. Early on, not long ago, it seemed like there was quite a variety in the community of exactly what is the responsibility of the well owner and what needs the well owner, what must the well owner report and what is desirable. And, the bottom line was, first of all, that well maintenance cannot cause the failure due to groundwater lowering or groundwater quality. It turned out that there's really only a minimum of data that the well owner has to provide in our assessment here. This talks about required data and a lot of desirable data if it's available. And to me, that's an important point that was made here, is that the mandatory data that needs to be supplied by the well owner is a much shorter list than the data that would be nice to have. And so to me, that's a key element of this document, is to distinguish between the data that has to be part of the application and the data that would be useful to have in the application. And I think the language in here kind of captures that.
And I think you have to think about the fact that many of the people that are well owners today are not the original well owner. And the original well owner probably knew, not necessarily, but probably knew all this information because he was there when the well was drilled, or she, and this is just as important as knowing, how do I want to explain it? Your automobile, you have 4 tires on your automobile. You do check them once in a while to make sure they're not flat before you go out on the road. Well, that's kind of like this. That's a very simplistic comparison. But you need to know these things about your well. You need to know them and keep track of them so that when you do have a problem, it can be analyzed. The longer it takes a well driller to pull your well and try to figure out what's wrong with it, the more expensive it is. Time is money. And time is money with regards to the GA staff trying to figure out what the well owner has submitted to them to review. It's replenishment fee money. So having a clear-cut list, this is what you need, this is what you better have. If you don't have it, you better find out about it, I think is the way to go. And on the issue of water quality, and there are areas of our valley that have poor quality water, and as the water level declines, the water quality level is going to decline also. And I'll bring up what I brought up before, and that is the cemetery well. The cemetery well is no longer useful it's killed all the grass at the cemetery because of the water quality. So that part is important. For years, George, the Water District has offered people the service of, they have to pay for it, but they've offered them the service of instructing them and giving them water quality bottles to take water samples from their well, bring into the Water District, and the Water District sends it down with their own samples. So it's tested. There are only two certified labs in the general area, one in Victorville and one in Bakersfield. And that is a huge benefit to the well owner, by the way, that the Water District offers to do that.
Yeah, and question about that. So if you have a well with substandard EPA water quality, so it's in violation of some, certainly simply drilling a deeper well or a bigger well may not be the answer. So I assume treatment would be, so the GA is considering the installation of various treatment facilities such as carbon filtration and/or settling tanks, or what other types of like treatment that you can be done on a home well? Is that sort of the
No.
intent or no?
No, that is not the intent, I don't believe.
So if,
It's just, most people haven't a clue as to what their water quality is. And like I said, many of the homes that are on either private wells or small community wells, they move in, they don't know these things. We've talked to many people on mutual systems that they moved there because they wanted to live in the country, and lo and behold, they're on a well. They find this out after they buy the place. I don't quite understand that. But, you know, people who live in the city, the water comes out of the faucet, right? And it better come out of the faucet. And you're going to hear about it from them if it doesn't. But when you're on a private well or a small co-op, you're on your own.
yeah,
And it's your responsibility, and it's stated in the shallow well mitigation policy several places. It's the well owner responsibility to know what's going on with his well.
correct. I guess I ask because if you have poor water quality under your home, or it's your water quality, let's say your declining water levels have led to a point where your water quality is not good, simply drilling a different well or a deeper well isn't necessarily going to solve that problem, is it?
Probably not.
So that's why I ask if treatment is considered, because if we're considering the option to improve people's water quality, generally that's not simply just installing a new well. It would actually mean, in all likelihood, some method of treatment, as opposed, especially if they have an acceptable flow rate from the well at that point in time. You could spend a lot of money. You know, most private wells are on fairly small pieces of land, and the ability to move some distance to find better water is very limited. So I'm not making a recommendation, I'm just asking the question. It just seems like that's the only common sense way to sort of approach it. This is the way I approach the people who are exactly in the situation you described. They bought the house 2 years ago, they knew nothing about wells, now they have bad water quality. I can't tell you that it's out of compliance, I can tell you that it's dirty and it smells and they don't like it. And they probably are gonna have very limited data. And so we wanted to visit with them and say, like, look, here are things you can do to improve your water quality through treatment. So I just wanted to understand, where was the groundwater authority's intent, because simply drilling new wells may not be the answer.
Well,
Can I jump in here?
Oh, please.
We didn't see that you were on, Carol. I don't have the display. I'm glad to hear you're there.
Yeah, no, I figured you couldn't see that, Dave. Yeah, no, thank you. You know, I think that, you know, the question is, we don't really contemplate treatment as one of the mitigation measures. I don't know that we've ruled it out. I think it requires an evaluation of alternatives, but we're going to go with the most practical and cost-effective. Putting treatment on a domestic, residential well probably isn't the best idea.
it's much cheaper to buy than bottled water to drink.
But yeah, right. That's exactly right. Because when you come right down to it, most of the water that you use isn't really used for consumption, right? But it's, with regard to water quality, you can potentially avoid contaminants by going deeper and sealing off some of the upper perforations. It just depends on the characteristics of the aquifer, and that's something that would have to be evaluated as well.
Yeah, and let me add that at previous meetings, we had the full discussion about how much this committee and the subcommittee in their deliberations should go into the quality issue.
Right.
And we decided, just like we decided that we would focus only on the de minimis wells as far as the depth, we decided that this issue was far too complex to go into all the variables that must be considered, like Carol talked about. So the simple statement in the previous document that we approved prior to this immediately, as well as item number 4 down here, are the limits that we wanted as a committee to go to, and the subcommittee, that's what they recommended, and that's what the full committee agreed to.
You have to remember, George, this is a policy advisory committee.
Yeah.
So
So
if I
the
was giving,
questions you ask us are questions you should take to the full board when Stetson is there to answer those kinds of questions.
so I think if I was giving advice as a civil engineer with a PE license who specialized in water quality, is that if a well can cost upwards of $60,000, such as the Byerly well, treatment options are well within a much more reasonable cost range.
But his issue isn't water quality. He
But-
has 10 feet left of water left in his well.
I get that. What I'm saying is that for people who have water quality issues, the option to drill a new well on a small piece of property would likely be far more expensive than even a simple Culligan system that treats the water with a couple filters in it and a RO unit in the sinks or whatever. I happen to have bought one recently. It was $5,000 and it worked great. And, so there are, relatively good systems designed for homes. They're not free, but they certainly could be far more economical than say a new well that might have dubious results as far as how much it would improve your water quality. So that would be my recommendations, that those options might be something we should consider.
And there's been a general topic identified that we haven't really mentioned here in the last 10 minutes, and that is consolidation. And that's language that's been put
Right.
forward. And the whole question is, if one well has poor quality and there's not good water to be had, either at greater depth or less depth, that it's likely that there'll be other wells having the same problem in the neighborhood.
That's correct. And so we went, this is on Rademacher Street, by the way, where this well is. And it's
It's on what street?
Rademacher.
Oh, yes.
So-
That has been a known poor quality water area for the 54 years we have lived here.
Okay, and so we have a person who's filed a complaint, and they would like to hook to our system. And one of the things we suggested was to see if they could get with their neighbors and by working together, actually get put on our well system. But this is actually another option. So I want to approach these people because Ron up at the city asked me to look into it, and so I'm trying to look into it seriously and consider all options. And so I hate to take up too much time on this board on this particular subject, but it's a really good example of the type of things that may come up in the future and need to be considered. So I want to give them the best advice possible, and that will include connecting to our system. But that's if they were to do that alone, it would be upwards of $100,000 if they bore the cost for their own house based on their contract estimate and the research they've done. That could certainly be more cost effective if the whole street were to get put on our system, and we think that's a great idea, but we can't, of course, require that. We can only suggest it.
I have a comment on that, but we have some Don at the podium, so.
Go ahead, Don.
Don Decker here. The issue of RO or other filtering schemes to clean up private well water, it's long since been taken advantage of here. That's not some new idea. There are dozens of wells that are on a limited filtration system. Works fine. And there's no reason, as has been pointed out earlier, to attempt to drill deeper or some other idea that will ultimately turn out to be worthless. The filtration is absolutely the way to do it. And since the amount of water that actually needs to be filtered is limited, it's basically kitchen water and bathroom maybe, you really don't have a very large system at all. And it'll typically, on North Brown Road, the folks that are doing it, the filter will last well over a year before replacement. And of course, all of the plumbing hardware that's associated with it is, it's not replaced, of course. It's fine the way it is. You just replace a filter. So this committee or the GA board doesn't have to consider RO or other filtration methods. It's already being done on dozens of properties, as is water hauling. That's the other option. The water hauling aspect that's going on here is pretty much invisible, but it's far from being minimal.
Yeah, I'd like to throw a comment in to get back to the consolidation topic, which has been discussed here. We haven't resolved it or made a recommendation yet. But I guess there's a question, if the water was poor in that neighborhood before the groundwater plan was written, then the GA has no responsibility for that. If this were a neighborhood that had good water quality when the groundwater sustainability plan was approved and the water quality went bad, then in my mind, the GA, and we've talked about this, has responsibility for that. And in fact, that kind of creates a firewall to protect the whole basin from undesirable results. So if water quality goes bad in a neighborhood during the reign, so to speak, of the GA, in my mind, there is an obligation to mitigate that, and that might require consolidation of a number of wells that might be expected to go bad in the same neighborhood. And I think it's within the responsibility of the Groundwater Authority to find the funding, consolidate those wells. If they have to bring in other water, it's Groundwater Authority's responsibility to do that, in my mind. But that's beyond the scope of what we're discussing today. But I think
Yes,
what
it
you
is.
brought up is an excellent point that we have touched on.
I would like to add a comment, and this is something that I think should be pursued further. I don't know by us or by whom, but you stated that these people had recently bought this home. And my understanding is it is the responsibility of the realtor to notify the buyer as to the quality of water if that residence or business or whatever is on a well and not on a public water system. And I think that's something that needs to be pushed by the GA, because we know of quite a few incidences where people have purchased homes in various parts of the valley that are on wells and have not been informed, good, bad, or in between, of the water, the condition of the well, the depth to water, the water quality. And I think that's something for perhaps a future topic. Not high on the list, but and again, it goes along, however, again, it goes along with this first document about the well owner's responsibility to know about his well. It's a buyer's responsibility to know what he's buying.
Correct. And I think I've received more than enough information to approach this family with rational comments about what may or may not be available to them and what types of information they might need. And certainly, I don't think it sounds super promising as a solution for them. However, I will at least inform them that the process exists and that they have the ability to apply, and we will talk with them also about other treatment methods that are available and, some sort of group connection to the thing so that we can have at least that way I can have a comprehensive discussion with at least a lot of their different options. So thank you all for that.
West, I liked your construct for recommended and desired on this document, and that fits really with the tasking that we were asked to provide the GA. But I would ask you, items number 3 and 4, are they also desired? Do they fit into the desired section? In your view and the subcommittee's view?
In my mind, 2 and 3 are desirable. 4, in my mind, would be also desirable, because a well owner may not have those records of the quality history of the water quality. I think it's highly desirable for the well owner to keep those records, even if it's just starting tomorrow. But if it were a new well owner and didn't have those records, I would hope the Groundwater Authority would have records for the neighborhood that might be able to assess whether or not the water quality was suitable when the Groundwater Authority took responsibility or not. So in my mind, number one is the mandate for the well owner to apply. It would be really nice if they had the information for number 4. I think items 2 and 3 are desirable and not mandatory to apply for remediation. So that's my point on that.
And
Let me
and I
jump
also-
in.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Let me jump in just for a second. Yeah, the number 4 is a question I had when we started this dang project, by the way, that we did not answer, because that's what I said. Okay, your water quality, does that mean you have to have a water quality report for when you started that well to prove that your water quality has gone south? So, yeah, that was a question I had that we have never answered. So I don't know. Don's going to correct me
Would you
here.
put it right now in the desired category as Wes just did?
Yeah, it'd be a desired, sure.
So-
It'd be good if you had it, yes.
I
Now,
would like-
mine, no, let me just throw in a bit more. We've had that well for, 40-plus years now. I don't know what it is. Been deepened because we had to. I don't think I've never had a water quality. I don't know, except we've done some EC testing on it. So, but that's all. I have no official record of water quality
I would
in my well at all.
like to remind the 2 subcommittee members that you both agreed to this document
Yeah, we did. Yeah, I
as
still do.
as it stands.
Yes, I still do.
Well, number 4 uses the word should. That's not shall, it
That's a
should.
rec-
Yeah,
It's a
right.
desired.
It's
Yeah.
a desired in my mind, and
So what?
Exactly.
What I see from this document, and I'm looking back at the tasking, recommendation regarding fair and reasonable expectations for documentation and demonstration. What I see this as is we've done just that. We are recommending back to, and perhaps this is, the title needs to conform with what we're trying to say here, and to answer the mail to the Groundwater Authority and have them accept this is our recommendation is there are required documentations, and that's consumed in item number 1, and there are desired things, and that's 2, 3, and 4, and we would also make the recommendation that this document be provided as information for the applicants in how to submit. So it would be an addition to the title that our recommendation clarify the items that are required versus desired, and then that they provide this and make it available, as Judy mentioned, in the specific case that was brought up at the last Groundwater Authority meeting. They would have access to that, or anyone else that applies.
But that's what it says. It says all those things you just said.
Except it doesn't say it is a recommendation on top of it and have the words required and desired, and as Wes suggested.
well, is there any reason we couldn't change the title to be I mean, I think the content is probably okay.
It's still good.
But the title, if we change the title, we might be more directly answering the mail.
As a person who worked hard on this document, along with you other folks that were on the committee, I think we're prying around on some really fine points. I think it stands fine just the way it is. The question that Lyle talked about at considerable length about whether or not a well does have a water analysis. The county has required a water analysis for a new well for a long, long time now. Whether the driller actually follows through and submits a sample is another issue. But our well, which was drilled before Lyle's by some few years, it was the same era, has a water quality analysis, just a Schedule A. So lots of wells should actually have that data. The county in principle has all that in their files, except their filing system is so terrible that you're lucky to find present modern day information, let alone something that's 40 years old.
Yeah, I do recall when my well was put in that, you know, I needed a permit, and to get a permit written off, I needed to provide the county, and I remember doing this, a water quality test but I think what really matters is what was the quality of the water when the GA took responsibility for precluding undesirable results. That to
But
me.
you can't ask people to do that. First of all, it's already passed.
Right. But what I'm suggesting is that the groundwater authority, the water sampling that's been done in the basin, that you're well aware of, Judy, the groundwater authority might be able to provide that information for itself by looking at historical groundwater quality in the neighborhood of the failed well.
But maybe the well owner in fact has it himself.
And should. And that would be strongly advised to do that, which is, I think, our number 4 states cleanly. I don't know that it should be mandatory that the well owner have done that to apply for remediation.
Well, that's why this is written like it is. If the PAC approves it and the board takes it and decides to use it, they can change it however they would like to change it. And the way the state is going, it's possible in the near future it may be mandatory, just because we have a lot of bean counters up there in Sacramento that need jobs.
Other discussion?
I have a question here.
I have a
So
question.
There's been a lot of talk about, you know, it'd be good if a well owner had their well drilling reports so they knew the depth. And then also if they had, a water quality report from the time that they've owned it. Seems to me like we could recommend to the GA that they put out some education to people that, you know, if you were at all concerned about ever coming to, you know, aside from, I remember they put out the cards, the mailing cards asking people to register wells. And I think that's one of the requirements here too, right? You need to have your well needs to be registered with the GA as well to be even eligible. And then, you know, sounds like continued education or some way to let people know if you want to be successful in ever bringing a claim forward, you should consider being proactive and going to get these things.
If you recall, when we started this discussion several months ago, we reviewed a document that I believe it came from Stetson, and it was for the well owner. And it was unclear, and it was very, very confusing. And Renee here, being involved with the Heritage Well, she brought up many criticisms of that document, and it is partly a result of those discussions, including her criticisms, that we created this one. To have basically a checklist. The checklist is really kind of short, and it would be better if you had this other stuff, and then it would be even better if you had the stuff on page 2.
So can
Or
I,
I guess you're all on page 1. When you get old, you go back to the primary print style.
so I'd like to understand the process after this checklist gets done, because I think this is a really good approach. It's a minimal, easy to understand checklist for a well owner to submit certain information. And I don't know what the process is beyond that, but then, so I would envision something like we get a minimal amount of data from a well owner, and then that allows the GA board to authorize some expenditure of funds for some well expert or well company to do some level of investigation that the GA would pay for. And at that point, the expert on wells who does the analysis then goes to a phase 2, which is sort of like, we believe this was as a result of declining groundwater, or this was not as a result of declining groundwater, declining water quality. So you have a sort of a two-step process, and it makes it easy for the person to get in because you have a very simple checklist with very little information. It then allows the board to authorize a limited expenditure of funds to do a proper investigation by a properly qualified firm, which then determines whether or not further expenditures are necessary. Is that the process we're envisioning? Because I think that's,
No,
okay.
this document would be given to the well owner. It would be, and he would, I mean, it can be rewritten in an application form if it's desired. He can submit the information. It goes to Stetson Engineers, who is the Groundwater Authority's contracting technical expert in a variety of areas, and they will evaluate it.
Isn't that what George just said?
No, he said
exactly.
hiring a well expert, another person. I took it to mean
So if
another
Stetson is
person.
if Stetson is the well expert, then I'm fully fine with that. I guess the process, because I didn't understand. So if Stetson is the well expert, I'm fine with that. That means we're in agreement. And then Stetson then comes forward with an evaluation that says, we've looked at the data that was submitted, maybe done some additional research or whatever they need to do to figure out the true result, and then that ultimately is the recommendation that goes to the board. And I think, I think I support this document because it's an easy pathway for people to get in and get that process started.
That was the objective, to take what had been written and to make it so that it included the required and desired information, and to write it in a short, clear way for people to understand.
Which is why I support what's sitting here in front of me.
And it's pretty basic. It's pretty basic. The issue of water quality is a lot more complicated, and it will require, as we discussed earlier and don't need to discuss again, additional laboratory testing. You have to, I know you don't know all these things yet, but this valley is one of the most studied valleys in the area of groundwater hydrology that's around. And Stetson Engineers, at the direction of the Groundwater Authority Board, are monitoring how many wells, Don?
It's on the order of 400.
Throughout the valley. So there is data out there in a variety of areas of the valley where there are private wells.
So, I guess my comment is I support the document as written.
Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I just want to ask, would the subcommittee be willing to put in like darkened subtitles, like above the number 1, so that people know that's required documentation? Because when I read this document, I assumed all of this was pretty much required unless they didn't have it. And then maybe have another subtitle above, that starts above 2 in darkened, emboldened lettering saying desired documentation if available. So that when somebody reads this, they automatically know what's required and what's kind of optional. I was wondering if the committee would submit to that. I'm not saying changing any wording or anything. I'm just saying put in those subtitles.
Renee, if you read the very first sentence of those various entries, for example, number 2, also submit as available, That's the third, fourth word. I think it's already here. You just have to read it.
Right. I was going to say that my recommendation is that we submit this to the board, and if they want Stetson to turn it into an application form where you put your name and you put a line, and you put your depth to water and put a line, that's up to them to do that. That's not our job.
Item number 3 reads as a required, submit known history of the well. Is that, and yet the discussion we've had so far, the committee, subcommittee agrees that that was a desired, to get at Renee's point.
Yeah, speaking for myself, I think adding those, dividing the document in those two major categories what might make it a little more clear.
I just want to say that when people read something for the first time, sometimes they've got to read it several times. It's hard for them to pay attention if things aren't obvious, things aren't emboldened with, with darker lettering, so they can kind of divide it up in their mind what's expected. Because a lot of people will probably look at this list, and then it takes them a while to figure out. And I think categorizing makes it easier, and then they think, oh, all I have to do is this top one for sure, and then the other 3, if I can find the data or if I gather the data on my own, once I become the well owner, then I'll be set up in case my well needs mitigation in the future. I think just making it easier, because in today's world, everybody wants things fast and quick and simple.
Again, this is a recommendation to the board. This is not this subcommittee being the board secretary.
I agree with Judy right now. What is written here is what is going to go to the GA board for their approval. If they want to they want to task Stetson to do a form with blanks in it to be submitted by the failed well owner, then so be it. But this tells them what we would like to see on the form.
Number 3.
As require, as necessary, as available.
It says submit known history. So if you don't know the history, you aren't going to submit it.
That's correct.
And
You have
I
to
do
remember,
believe-
lawyers are going to be dismantling this thing and helping rewrite it. So
Absolutely.
the simple
Absolutely.
recommendation would be the best, and then let the lawyers do the details.
I'm sure expect it to hit that certain file that's, I do believe that the original document, and I may be in error, but I believe the original document that Stetson had something that said the same thing, submit known history. I believe it said that in one of those,
I'm not sure I remember, Brad.
So do we have a motion?
I move we approve this as written.
Do we have a second?
second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
I just want to know, are the lawyers going to know that there's 2 categories of requirements here offhand? Because like you said, the third one.
I'm thinking if they have further questions, they can task the PAC again to just provide those final details. But I think right now we've got enough to at least put forward to the board for them to at least begin to consider it.
Yes. Thank you, John.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain, so it passes 4-0. And with that, we're up to item number, I'm sorry, I didn't formally ask for member or public comment once again, but we had it during the meeting. Was there any public comment before we record that vote online? Thank you. In the chamber?
This is Don Decker. I have one last comment. I think the board, the committee, I should say here, absolutely has their thinking going correctly, and that the vote that was just made is exactly what needs to be done. That is, get it going. We've messed around with this for a long time.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we go to number 7, closing member comments, and I'll start with Carol, since I know you're online still, Carol.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I had to take myself off mute. Well, thank you. And thank you for putting your recommendations together and finalizing them, because I think that's going to be a really helpful addition to the policy and the application forms. So thank you all very much. You know, you're all very knowledgeable in this area, so it's going to be very valuable and really helpful. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. We'll start at your end, George. Your closing comments.
I guess I say I'm happy to be here. This looks like a fun committee and a bunch of smart people, so glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Tom?
So the comments I made about getting some kind of education out to well owners, obviously the GA did their mailer a couple of years ago informing people, hey, you should register your wells. And now here's one of the benefits. Now we're talking about what the benefit is. I do think that the community engagement plan that you guys have worked on, it's in its infancy. It needs to be rolled out. We did talk about the need for the GA to do some sort of public affairs role, with some of the recommendations we've made have been the info sheets, on the particular topics and making it very simple and understandable. Because actually in the other building that I work in, over at the BLM office, the Public Lands Roundtable is there tonight meeting. That's kind of a multi-use group that meets, has met for 20 years. They don't understand really any of what the GA does. It's interesting. I think maybe the environmental group in your friends of the NGO, I think they kind of get it because they follow LAWP. But I've had a couple of side conversations and they really don't get it yet. Why do you need a pipeline? Why can't you do the injection? All these things still keep coming up. And this community engagement plan, I just kind of fleshed out one of the aspects that this recommendation could add to that. And so, if anything, my agency gets peppered with, why are you guys working on an environmental assessment with the GA, for these kind of things. And sure, it'd be great to get more upfront messaging out and just doing that community engagement part. So anyhow, that's what I want to say.
Thanks, Tom. John?
No further comments from me. That's my word.
Renee?
It works now.
I want to thank the subcommittee for coming up with the checklist. I think it's a really good list, and I know you worked hard on it, and I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say it looks to me like George is capable of jumping in the deep end of the pool and swimming with the best of them. And I'm looking forward to work with you. I think you're already bringing a lot to the table.
Thank you, sir.
Lyle?
Oh, we're going to skip over? Yeah, I'd like to thank George, too, for being here. I think this is going to be interesting. I like what you have offered this evening, so yeah, it's good. Look forward to that. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to say that it wasn't dozens of hours we worked on these documents. It was hundreds. And thank you, Renee, for the compliment. And I think, Tom, that you have a good idea. I hope Carol's still listening. And she talked at the last board meeting about putting together things to put out to the public. And if they're still there, I know at least 2 of your roundtable folks who are private well owners. And I point out they don't come to the GA meetings or listen in and comment because we never hear their names, and you might point that out to them. Participation is a two-way street, and so is education. People can put out information, but if people refuse to take it and learn from it, there's not a whole lot you can do.
Thanks, Judy. I would like also to commend the subcommittee, and as a reminder, that was Lyle, Judy, West, and our TAC advisory member, because this wasn't able to be, although we wanted it to be a joint policy advisory committee and technical advisory committee subcommittee. And that recommendation is what we have gone forward with tonight as a full PAC. As it goes from here, these documents will bear the imprimatur, if I can be so high and mighty for the policy advisory committee to say that's what we're giving. But it goes forward as a full committee recommendation, set of recommendations, the 2-pager and the 1-pager. And there was a lot, as Judy mentions, George didn't have a chance to witness it, but there was a lot of time and agony put into this. And also individual members are reviewing and commenting and getting to the place we have gotten to, and I think it's a good place. And we will forward that as we can.
I would like to add something. I would like to thank the Technical Advisory Committee member, Don, for his very knowledgeable input that helped so much in writing this.
Yeah, and that was obvious. That's why it was proposed as a combination committee event, but the Technical Advisory Committee does not technically exist because it doesn't have a quorum. But we got the full board approval to have Don serve as a technical advisor. So it was as good as the organization could do, and I think the results are excellent. I will say that clears the table for what Carol and others brought up at the last Groundwater Authority meeting is what we've got coming on our plate really quickly, and that could be a matter of a month or less, or I'm sorry, a month or less than a year, perhaps, somewhere and probably in the 2 months, the individual sections of the rewrite update of the groundwater sustainability plan. So you all remember when we went through that chapter by chapter. That's a lot of work, and it will contain, and there was specific reference to this, it will contain, obviously, the recommended corrective actions, progress, process, and what's been done on those, as well as the updates to the management actions, the programs, et cetera. So clear your tables. We're going to have a busy winter, I think, perhaps, and with that, we're closed.
Well, before you close, well, you already did. Will we be having a meeting next month?
We'll have to see what we get tasked with.
November, the 4th Thursday of November is Thanksgiving.
Good point, Judy.
And the 4th Thursday of December is the 28th, so it's kind of in between Christmas and New Year's.
Okay, well, I will say, committee, can I please have your attention, committee?
See, you banged it too soon.
Can I please have your...
There you go.
We're not in session fully, but I want to say...
Hey, guys, the meeting is still going on. Oh, I heard the gavel.
Well, there was in the middle of it, somebody interrupted, so the gavel didn't fall in the forest because some of us heard it, but not all of us. There's about 3 mixed metaphors in there. I wanted to say our standing meetings for November and December are on holidays. So for the next meeting, be prepared to discuss your schedules so that we can set alternate dates for those meetings as we have each of the last 7 years. So be ready to discuss that, because we will make the determination at those meetings when our November meeting and our December meeting will be, the regular meetings rescheduled as specials will be held. Our October meeting will be held on schedule if we have an agenda item, and I believe we will. Okay?
Okay.
And with that, the tree fell and we're closed.